The Toronto Blue Jays made a sneaky signing in lieu of some roster moves that they had to make with some injuries, of course. Jimmy Garcia placed on the IL, but who's going to come in and fill that role? The Jays made a signing, and hopefully it could help towards that. So we'll break that down and much more on this episode of Jays Digest. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Briones, alongside host Nick Goss. The Toronto Blue Jays made a signing. It's not the sexiest signing in the world, but spoiler alert, it is a former first-round pick, and it is someone who has a track record at the major league level, albeit not too successful, but still, he's got good stuff and decent upside with this signing for the Blue Jays, and I'm sure the player that we're going to talk about very soon is going to play a role in the near future with the Jays because they need help and they need it in any way that they can get it. But Nick, another disappointing loss yesterday. The road to 500, it gets a little bit harder now because you're 2 games under 500. And just when we thought the Jays were there, when they were starting to turn the corner, they revert back to ground zero. And that's been the story of this season, that we're so excited of the possibility of them getting back to 500 that we tend to forget the expectation heading into the year was to be one of the best teams in the American League, to be competing for the division title, which is now totally out of the question because the Yankees are the best team in baseball. And then you are closely followed by the Baltimore Orioles, who could make a case for being the second best team in baseball. So, Nick, doesn't get any easier from here on out, especially considering the injuries that the Blue Jays have to deal with right now. But a signing today, and maybe we'll see him in a J uniform pretty soon.
Another game one loss for the Toronto Blue Jays in a series, which is like their fifth or sixth in a row. So it's been very, very rough. But yeah, you mentioned it. They made a signing today, and let's dive right into it. And this one's interesting, Peter. Usually when they make these signings, it's players who haven't had much experience at the major league level or haven't pitched very much. But James Caprillion, I think is how you pronounce his name, is a very interesting one, as he was a former, like you mentioned it in the intro, a former top prospect in the Yankees organization, was a part of that 2017 deal that shipped Sonny Gray to the Yankees and ultimately shipped Caprillion to the Athletics. Peter, this guy is interesting. I'm going to show you his stats. Last season was pretty rough, but if you look at the 2 seasons before that, a lot of innings, over 100, and a pretty solid ERA. And it seems like when the Jays have made these signings this year and even in past years, when they make and sign a player like this, they bring him up pretty quickly. Now, who knows? Maybe he'll get a few starts in Buffalo in AAA for a while, but I think he might be next man up for the pitching depth on this Toronto Blue Jays team, depending how, which we'll get into in a minute, some more updates with Jimmy Garcia, Yariel Rodriguez, all these guys, but they signed him about an hour ago, and I actually don't mind the signing. He was a league average pitcher in 2021, pretty average in 2022, albeit he had a very rough season last year.
Yeah, well, I think you have no choice but to bring him up and see what you got in him because the Jays don't really have much in terms of starting pitching depth in Buffalo. That's been pretty ransacked with injuries and they haven't really had any contributions from anyone. So I think if anyone were to come up and contribute, it would be James Caprillion, who has decent stuff, throws in the mid 90s. He has an okay slider, he's got good stuff and he is a starter. He's an innings eater, or he has been in the past with the Oakland A's. So definitely someone that's going to get a long extended look, and depending on where they want Yariel Rodriguez now with all the bullpen injuries, I believe Yariel could probably be the closer or the eighth inning man as soon as he's healthy or ready to go, because who else do the Jays have in that role? I mean, Tim Meza is not cutting it. He's got an ERA over 6. I don't think Brandon Eisert is going to pitch in any high leverage situation. So the Jays are pretty thin in that regard too, considering the injuries to Romano, Swanson, and Jimmy Garcia as well. Swanson's not hurt. He's just not performing right now. So the Jays got to find some answers, and they've been searching all season long. We don't even know the answers. I don't think John Schneider knows the answers. I don't even think the front office has the answers right now to solve the problems on this team. So I do expect Caprillion to be the 5th starter, and I also expect Yariel Rodriguez to move to the bullpen, not because he's not cut out to be a starter, but because the Jays just don't have anything else in that position right there.
It's actually a very interesting point, and you can see here, Emirian Garcia shows no structural damage, so he's not going to be a Tommy John contender, so which is very, very good. But you can see the moves they made yesterday. Jimmy Garcia up, Brandon Eisert selected. An update on Yariel Rodriguez is that he's on the way back to the Jays very soon, and most people assumed he was going to be a starter, but now after this signing, and again, we don't know if he's going to be pitching for the Jays yet, but maybe, I never thought about that, but maybe you're right in the sense of they're going to move Yariel to the bullpen, because they really only have two relievers that they trust right now, and that's Trevor Richards and the other guy, Chad Green. So if maybe they sign him, they're going to bring him up to be maybe not necessarily the full-time starter, but help be the bulk guy for Bowden Francis, which also in turn will allow Trevor Richards to switch into the high leverage role, which will also allow Yariel Rodriguez to play out of the bullpen. That could solve some of the bullpen issues instead of just slipping Yariel Rodriguez right up. I don't know if they'd make this move. It could just be a AAA depth move, but I think at this point, he's shown enough in the past. Yeah, it's not flashy, to at least give him a shot to be a piggyback guy, or maybe Bowden Francis piggybacks off him, just so they can add more depth into their bullpen with the Ariel, who can now slide into maybe a 2 or 3 inning guy or a high leverage guy in the 8th or 7th inning.
Yeah, it's definitely not a depth move. I can guarantee that. I'm giving a guarantee because he's someone that has experience at the big league level. He's had somewhat of a successful career or a successful couple of seasons there with Oakland. So he's going to get every chance to earn that spot in the rotation. And I mean, it's not the flashiest move. He's not an ace. Let's not expect that out of him, but he's someone that could eat innings and someone that can do a job for you. Something that the Blue Jays have been searching for. And yeah, I think they're better off with Yariel in the bullpen because he's got great stuff. And I actually trust him to get outs against the middle of the order. I don't know. I don't know about you, Nick, but I don't want Genesis Cabrera being the 7th inning guy on this team. I just don't trust him in that role. He's fine in a middle relief role. Same thing with Meza, I guess. He's fine in that role, but the Jays don't have enough quality arms in the back end of their bullpen to get outs. And I think that's why they made a move like this for Caprillion to start, because he's comfortable in that role. And for Bowden Francis, Yariel Rodriguez, Trevor Richards, and Chad Green to do whatever they can to get outs and get some wins on the board if the Jays manage to get leads in ball games. I think that's the blueprint right now. It's not exciting. It's not a positive outlook, but the Jays got to just find ways to win. And I think their best chance of doing that is having the most lethal, the most electric arms in the back end of that bullpen. Doesn't matter if they're starters or not.
Yeah, and Yariel is only going 2 to 3 innings anyway. And you mentioned he had a decent past couple years. It is a minor league deal right now, but like we've seen, they're going to keep it a minor league deal until they figure out what corresponding move they make. They probably won't make that for a couple days, or maybe they'll do one more bullpen day. But as we've been speaking, the bullpen days kind of are starting to get really hurting on the rest of the bullpen, which kind of slides everyone down. And you can see here, he is now 11 months removed from his last shoulder surgery, and that's kind of what hindered him last year. He's had shoulder surgeries in each of the past 3 years. You can see the last sentence there, 2021, 2022, and 2023. So you can attribute some of the injuries to why his ERA was maybe high, and I think given a chance, he could have could be an interesting story, especially because Alek Manoah is done now for the foreseeable future. So it'll be interesting. Let us know in the comments down below what your thoughts are on all this, as well as the injury updates we have here, and let us know if you want to see James Caprillion start for the Blue Jays soon. But if you want to check out a video from yesterday, click on your screen now. See you soon.